Hello, everyone. Welcome. You are listening and watching Rashkin Report Perspectives and Silicon Curtain one at a time. But wherever you see this, if you see it on those two channels, make sure to like and subscribe because that's what decent people do. And my name is Yuri Rashkin, joined as always by Jonathan Fink of Silicon Curtain. And we are just here to kind of draw a connection, a little bridge between Ukraine, Europe, United States, where I am, and bring the world a little bit together, which is kind of what you did, Jonathan, this past week on your marathon. I was so impressed. And kudos to you for bringing people together. So many voices that everybody has their own little circle, and then they all came together. That was really incredible. And you raised money. So,
And
wow.
we raised money too. Well, I was delighted that you could join, that we could work our normal format into that. And of course, we were lucky to have Konstantin with us as well. And I don't think he's really done one of those before. And I think it was already kind of big ask to come and join us. And then suddenly there are a lot more people in the room unexpectedly, including my dear friend Christine, who's was dialing in from Kiev. And I certainly didn't engineer it for her to be on at the time, and she knows that it just incidentally happened. I think we had a sort of a moment of intense broadcasting. I've got it magic there, but it was hard on Constant because he was, I think, very visibly and emotionally affected by being in a room with someone who's under fire from his country, essentially, under missile and drone fire. I think he found that deeply affecting. And yeah, I mean, I didn't want to force that. I wouldn't have forced that on anyone, but I think it happened, and it was quite moving.
Sometimes it's hard to even imagine the power of emotions between Ukrainians and Russians for those that are not part of the conflict. Like a lot of people in America, especially when they ask me, is Ukrainian language, is it really different or is it just like Russian? I mean, there's level of ignorance is high because there's just no familiarity. But considering everything that has happened, I think that this only it's like a visual representation of the war that is raging out there, and it's raging within people as well. I saw a video of a person who is a Russian speaker who was confronting a Ukrainian speaker on a train in Switzerland, yelling at him to stop speaking Ukrainian. I would feel that those kind of conflicts are that's part of it. But I think Constantine, just being a man of conscience, behaved in a way that is admirable, and I think that's just it's opportunity for the viewers to. That's what you get for tuning in, is to see incredible moments. So.
And that's it. And it's a really as a contrast, someone who can have deeply humane feelings, who has the capacity to, I would say, have repentance, have even though they directly are not responsible, and left at the earliest opportunity so as not to participate.
And yet, from the point of view of
And
many
yeah, he
Ukrainians, there's
apologized
still,
deeply. Yes.
but from the point of view of many Ukrainians, that's not good enough. You know,
It's not, and it'll take a long time before it is. And I think that's probably in the times we're considering. I wouldn't demand of people who feel like that anything else. I wouldn't say that they're unreasonable, because I've seen different people react in different ways. You can't demand that at this point. Like we couldn't have demanded that we make friendly with the German, who's fled the regime in 1944, 43. If someone's had their house bombed, their neighbors killed, their stuff destroyed, their neighborhood wrecked, you can't sort of demand, let's say, a normal level of reaction to that, or even demand that they sort of tolerate, the language of the person that's called them this pain. Yeah, I wouldn't ever demand that.
right. So I think that's I think for me, I think back to, I guess, BLM and the idea of taking a knee. And that was something that was seen here as a sign of respect, a sign of understanding, and in certain ways, sign of repentance.
Yes.
And I think in the Russian info space, it was taken exclusively as a sign of weakness.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, you can see how, and you can see why propaganda would do that. And I found that clip that you mentioned there of the guy in Switzerland. Now, Switzerland is famous for harboring a lot of Russians in it. Some of whom, wouldn't want to have anything to do with the war, would rather pretend that that's not existing, and they certainly wouldn't, demonstrably call attention to, their country of birth, etc. But there are characters like the one we saw, those whose brains are not just utterly scrambled by propaganda, hate, and loathing, which is true, but quite possibly, I don't know if that's the case in this instance, but quite possibly people who know that they can potentially earn something from the Russian state still, or take a vicarious kind of pride in belonging to a nation that is inflicting that kind of pain and hurt and destruction, because they don't see it as wrong, morally wrong, politically wrong, or anything else. I think there are many, many people, unfortunately, who could be classed as the sort of Z patriot, who are quite happily sitting there with German passports, Australian passports, and especially Swiss passports. And in this instance, this person wasn't obviously very drunk or anything. He just was extremely brutish in his language, and absolutely barbaric in his attitude of the passengers who one assumed had done nothing, absolutely nothing to him. Unfortunately, I don't know what you think when you hear that. Unfortunately, it's no longer shocking, because I've seen so many videos with that level of sort of hatred expressed, unfortunately.
I try to generally stay away from most videos of that sort, and because I feel like it is what it does also is it radicalizes us by watching it. And I try to be very careful about consuming that sort of media. But we don't. I think what we're likelier to see is manifestation of war and what happens in a, I would say, Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But that's where I kind of wonder, in a sense, that the antipathy that there is towards Jews and Israelis, that many Jews and Israelis interpret as anti-Semitism. I wonder why we don't see that towards Russians. Like if they, because they did to Ukraine like really bad things. If we're comparing, a level of people who are from a state who are, so, or you can say that, Russians, they're just slaves. It's not really their choice. Israel is a democracy, but I think that's grasping at straws.
It is. There's a real cultural difference here, and I do watch quite a few of these videos. I know, as you say, that some are amplified and they're not necessarily representative. You might have 10,000 Russians who are in the West, just living their lives quietly, expressing their views privately, one way or the other, and not making that kind of fuss. And of course, no one films them, because this is very boring. They only film the ones that are likely to go viral, like this one did. But I haven't seen any videos at all of Ukrainians attacking, or being the first to attack, or berating Russians or Russian speakers in that fashion. And it's not because, as some people say, oh well, maybe they can't tell because Ukrainians speak Russian, etc. No, you can tell. Ukrainians can tell. Typically, they can tell a Russian accent from Ukrainian speaking Russian. They usually can tell whether it's Moscow region or whatever. So I don't think it holds that Ukrainians that wouldn't be sure. They would know if they're in the presence of someone from Russia. When in the West, I simply have not seen any videos that show the opposite side of that. The aggression of Ukrainians towards Russians.
I don't think we're like creating any stereotypes here when we say that Russians are known outside of Russia, not necessarily for good things, but sometimes being for loud, obnoxious, throwing their weight around, and being rather rude if you come in contact with them. So I think that this is more of a, just to me, a representation of somebody who feels, who comes from this militarized culture, where they are at war, and they are, they're watching propaganda that's been explaining to them that Ukrainians are Satan for a long time now. And I would never discount a possibility of somebody who has a deep psychological trauma to be attacking strangers on a train for a language that they're choosing to speak. On the other hand, well, now going back to the United States, where we see a situation here breaking out about immigrants, where we're used to be that we're the country of immigrants, the land of immigrants, but now we're the land of people with papers. And in this situation, when you have ICE agents attacking ice cream sale, person selling ice cream, or the group of men gathered to go to work, it seems like speaking a foreign language can cause quite a strong reaction depending on where you are.
I mean, that happens in a variety of places. I mean, Britain, it's not unknown in Britain for videos to surface of people being rather unpleasant to others based on, what language they're talking, what ethnicity they're perceived to be, the color of their skin. It's unfortunately we have some of that stuff going on, and the rise of Farage, the far right extremism, Tommy Robinson, gives some people license to think that they can get away with what they know to be uncultured, what they know to be illegal, but they feel they can get away with it. And I like to say as well, for those who, well, so hang on a second, you're talking about the boorish behavior of Russians abroad, which in aggregate is well known.
I mean, yeah,
I
this
mean,
is really more of a stereotype, I thought.
well, the Brits are hardly immune from some accusations of that.
Well,
Certain.
luckily, Americans are nice and cultured.
Well, I mean, fewer Americans go abroad, don't they? So maybe we're
Well,
spared the
yes, that's
worst.
true.
They
Few
they
of us
don't
go.
even travel.
Yeah, I
Um,
think with the thing with Americans though is that we live in cities which are very loud, and so when we go to other places, we're used to being loud because that's how we're trained. And then it turns out like, why are you so loud? I don't know. That's how everything is. So, you know what? We have a very short amount of time today,
we
which is
do.
not fair, but I want to find out your thoughts about Mr. Zelensky going to Washington. I thought that maybe after what happened last time, that they would never ever. But it seems like our president is more like a goldfish where he has no memory of yesterday, and that may be a good thing.
Could be a good thing. I was best friends with this guy, Mr. Putin, and now I'm not so sure. Um, It could go either way, couldn't it? It could be a gentle 1940s movie, Volodymyr goes to Washington, or it could be, a 1970s horror, Volodymyr escapes from New York or something like that. Um, I think there's been a substantial change in tone, which we already started talking about a few weeks ago. And because Trump changes his mind over and over, because he has repeated and amplified Russian talking points many, many times, we find it very difficult to think that anything could actually fundamentally change. There are signs in Trump's tone and speech and tweets, and there are signs coming, importantly, I think, from those around him. Now, if we say that actually, maybe it's less important to see what Trump says, it's more important to see what Rubio, Hegseth, even Vance say, because they're very closely observing what Trump does. They're not going to say anything that is not aligned with Trump. They're going to want to be in his wake, amplifying and supporting him. Their tone has changed remarkably in the last couple of weeks towards, the US isn't going to be providing free aid to Ukraine. That's never going to happen. But they're now putting extended pressure, I think, on European allies to plug the gaps in munitions funding, to step up to the plate, and to try and hold Russia at bay. There has been a substantial change, and we've got the talk of intelligence already being provided to Ukraine to help them hit energy targets. So something has changed. Now we can argue, I guess, till where the cows come home about what that is, but it seems to me that certain things are still true. The world is made up of a small number of kings, and Trump would love to be best friends with Vladimir, but Vladimir is not showing him respect. So I think we're now seeing a tussle between the kings or between the mafia bosses, and I think Trump has realized that kingpin mafia boss Putin is no longer the guy he once was. He's moving down the pecking order. He's weak. Therefore, if he doesn't show due fealty, then you need to show him how that's done. So I really think what we've got here is a tussle between kings. And rather than Ukraine being a pawn the other way to try and sort of dangle it as a nice morsel to your chum Putin, I think they're now moving into a phase where they utilize or leverage Ukraine as a genuine proxy to put pressure on and get at Putin, or try to show him his place in this hierarchy. That's the sense, I think, of where it's going. But people will have their own views, of course.
Interesting. My theory on this is it's about time. Because time is something that used to be the standard operating procedure. That's what Putin needed, and that's what Trump was willing to give him. And it didn't work. And it doesn't work for Putin really anymore, because it turns out that the more time is just giving Ukraine more time to destroy his oil refineries and infrastructure. And this is getting worse and worse for Putin, who's not able to get much further in Ukraine, but his own country is going to crap. So this concept of time is no longer functioning very well. And although I love a quote from Peskov where he is like, thanks to Trump for trying to bring peace, but our economy is stable, which to me says China is with us. So they feel like they can manage the time with Chinese support. But it seems what's different now is that our president himself is acting like he's got limited amount of time. And at first, it seemed like this was related to Nobel Peace Prize because, he wants the recognition. Oh, he's going to do it for the prize. Well, prize passed, and he's still interested because he said 24 hours. He said many things. But then all of a sudden, a couple of months ago, something changed. Perhaps he's got some news that his amount of time is limited. And he's been acting in a way that's been very different, where all of a sudden he wants, but of course this is Trump peace. This is not like this is we're going to address all the fundamentals. This is we're going to paint over all the roaches and we're going to call this a new sale. This is a new building. Welcome, buy this. There's peace forever now. You've been all waiting for me. But there's urgency to Trump that we haven't seen before. So with that in mind, and considering that he still calls Putin a great guy, I don't think he's actually wants to give tomahawks to Ukraine, although he might if it doesn't work. But he's really counting on him calling Putin and saying, Volodya, come on, you don't want me to give Ukraine these tomahawks, do you? And stop and get him to stop. And it could be described as, well, there's a terrible situation at the nuclear power station at Zaporozhye, and so they have to repair it, and maybe that would be the reason for a peace for a second day, and then Trump will come out and say the peace has returned to Europe. But he's just trying to cram things really quick, and that's, I feel, is changing things. He would like to announce tomorrow or whatever, on Saturday. He would like to Friday that whenever he can, that peace has been reached. That it's not that Ukraine is getting tomahawks, but that Putin agreed that peace is better than tomahawks hitting Russia, and that's it. And just that's it. And we'll see if that approach works, because Putin is not willing to stop.
He's certainly not stopping. I mean, I've just been working on an episode for the channel that shows that the Russian economy is, well, not just sort of, it's at a cliff edge. It's quite clearly now they've got sort of 30% of the largest enterprises are technically in the red. They're hiking taxes all over the place. The regions are being bled dry. And stuff is starting to, crash all over the place, both physically and metaphorically. But they're not letting up. All of this sucking the marrow out of the bone is not being put towards restructuring the economy for civilian times. It's all being used to double down on war and more war. I was saying this in the first weeks, months of the war, that Putin is not a strategist. He's not inventive. He's not imaginative. He is brutal and pathological, but he doesn't have a concept of of necessarily backing down. Well, there are two little interesting, incidents that suggest that if he's faced with enough force, or he really needs to back down, he will do it, such as the apology he gave to the president of Azerbaijan about the airliner. He doesn't. It's deeply humiliating for him to admit making any mistakes ever. But if he absolutely has to, strategically, he'll do it. Inviting the new leader of Syria to Moscow. I mean, goodness knows what Assad thinks of that, and greeting him as if he was an old friend. I mean, that can't be particularly easy on either of them, given that this guy who they invited as an honored guest had destroyed Putin's control and his puppet regime, and the dictator he's sitting next to had massacred this leader's people. It's an extraordinary kind of. So you can have these circumstances where extreme strength. Putin will put himself in the hierarchy, like he does to Xi in China. He doesn't try to sort of play that one-upmanship there. It's just that the West is incredibly weak. We don't show him who's boss, and he constantly feels that he has to, reassert that pecking order. Well, we've got Trump and him doing that now, but it's quite clear that he is tooling the Russian economy to suck remaining resources, bodies, minerals, whatever it is, out of that country in order to perpetuate the war. He's not going to stop. He cannot stop psychologically, physically, or politically.
Jonathan, thank you to you. I agree. I felt from the beginning in 22, with beginning of the big invasion, that Putin is not going to stop until he takes the whole country through the meat grinder, and he just continues to do that. We're going to have to cut this one short today, so we will regroup next week. But I'm, so appreciative for Silicon Curtain being there, bringing people together. It makes all of us feel a little less alone. And thank you to you, and thanks to all our listeners and viewers who are seeing this on any channel, whether it's Rashkin Report or Silicon Curtain. You are amazing. Support Ukraine, support civilization, and we're going to make it. Thanks, Jonathan.
We'll eventually make it. Yuri, thank you so much for all your support and friendship.